Well, I guess it's kia ora from New Zealand here. I've been looking forward to presenting to you about what Dairy NZ does for the New Zealand dairy farmers. A little bit different to what was planned. I was looking forward to coming to Argentina and having a visit. It would have been my first visit, but it just shows you how small our globe is with the current pandemic. New Zealand's actually had its borders closed since the middle of February. And I guess it's been a little bit easier for us as we're a little island, and from middle of March, from March, we went into 6 weeks of complete lockdown. And then since then, we've managed to, I guess, operate under restrictions. New Zealand has had less than 1,500 confirmed cases of COVID. And unfortunately, yesterday we had another death related to COVID, so a total of 25 deaths. A little bit different to what's happening in the globe across the world, and you know, it's devastating to hear reports that are coming into New Zealand from what's happening further afield. I don't want to dwell too much on the COVID. I know it's interrupted this conference and many others, so I don't have a lot of time today, so I will continue with our presentation. Just a little bit about me. I am a farmer elected director onto the governing board of Dairy NZ. I've been on that board for about 5 years. I'm a third generation dairy farmer. My husband and I took the traditional route to farm ownership in New Zealand, and that was from working on a farm to herd owning, share farming, and then to farm ownership. In 2006, we actually won the New Zealand title for Share Farmer of the Year, which is a celebration on people who excel across their business in the area of dairy farming. Today, I have ownership interests in an 800 cow, 300 hectare farm in the bottom of the South Island of New Zealand. I guess this picture should all be familiar to you, our world-leading All Blacks. We have very successful, profitable and environmentally aware New Zealand dairy farmers. And they are a source of wonder across the world, as they're one of the very few farming economies that operate in the free market. And most New Zealand dairy farmers are hardwired to solve problems. Before I get into a little bit about what Dairy NZ does, I'll just give you a little bit of an overview in the next 3 slides of our farming sector here in New Zealand. I won't talk to all of the points, I'll just highlight some interesting facts as we go through, but there is quite a lot of information on these screens, and I have tried to relate them back into sort of US litres of milk and US dollars, so it sort of kind of makes a little bit more sense for you there. So interesting fact for New Zealand, up until recently there were more cows in New Zealand than there are people, and that's about evened out now, so we're sitting just under, our population as well as our cow numbers are sitting under just the 5 million mark. Interesting, all of our cows are actually they're not housed in any barns or anything, they are outside grazing pasture, and 81% of all feed eaten is pasture based, and that can also include silage and hay supplements that are made. Regionally across New Zealand, we're very diverse climate wise, and each region has its unique set of challenges as we dairy farm across the whole of New Zealand. I guess what's interesting, even though we appear to punch our way to on the global market, we're actually only 3% of all of the world milk pool. We export 95% of our production, and our milk price average on this slide, it does say for 2018, 2019, that I've actually put up there the average price that farmers are paid. The last year we were up in the $7 bracket. and I've also got the break-even price there. This morning I realised there's a slight mistake, or I guess a typo on this slide. There where it talks about 31% of total goals, that's actually total goods exported from New Zealand. So dairy and tourism are the biggest contributors to New Zealand's economy. Dairy has actually headed tourism off, and unfortunately with the COVID outbreak, our tourism industry has basically tipped over. So I guess what I'm trying to explain here is dairying is a major contributor to New Zealand's economy and the biggest contributor. Into the people space and a little bit around our environmental and animal welfare space. So our animal welfare standards rank first in the world, and our, I guess our emissions are interesting. Back in 2017, there was a study completed and it said that we are 64% more efficient with our emissions than the global average. We don't have the issue for carbon across our farming sector. We're reasonably carbon neutral, but as we go forward, we have a huge methane impact, and dairy, or the farming sector, contribute to half of New Zealand's emissions with methane, and dairy makes up about 22% of that. We are huge employers, not only on farm, but also in our processing and wholesaling for New Zealand's people. And we would be probably one of the biggest employers, employing sectors. So in 2017, there was a collaboration across our whole sector. So we had dairy processors, farmers, our stakeholders and people directly linked to farming come together and decide that we needed an industry strategy. And so there was a major collaboration and consultation period, and this strategy, Dairy Tomorrow, was launched in 2017. So it has 6 ambitious goals, and they sit in the area of environment, animal care, people, our rural communities, profitable and competitive dairy farming businesses, and valued dairy nutrition. So, so the whole sector works together to deliver this, and this strategy actually drives Dairy NZ's investments on where we may spend our money. So a little bit about Dairy NZ. So we are a science organisation. We're also a not-for-profit, and we are what we call an industry good. So we actually don't, we're not a commercial operation. We don't sell anything that's commercially viable. Our constitution, although we will invest with commercial partners in the science space, it is not a field that we play in. So what do we actually do for our farmers? We provide practical on-farm tools, and as technology is growing, that tends to be in the area of apps on the phone, so they can take science and technology directly onto farm to help so it becomes relatable to them. I said before science, so we have large research programs, and we tend to collaborate and coordinate with other science organisations, not only in New Zealand, but also globally. We have a team of staff, and we do extension into the farmer base. So we hold, and I'll talk about this a little bit further on in my presentation, we hold workshops and work towards building the capability on farm. And I guess more recently, although we've always done the leadership, we've really been pushed into the more of an advocacy role for our farmers as we see pressures from, I guess, local, our government here in New Zealand, and the changes in legislation. We are also the guardians of the sector strategy that I talked about in the previous slide. So I guess we monitor it, we drive it, and it's sort of a leadership role in that respect, that we encourage other members to participate to deliver some of those results. So Dairy NZ itself, about 250 staff, mainly, they're dairy system, farm system specialists, many PhD scientists, and particularly in the area of water quality, animal care, and foragers. How are we funded? So we're predominantly funded by a levy from the farmers. Now this levy is legislated in government. It's called the Commodities Levy. Farmers get to vote every 6 years whether they want to continue to fund Dairy NZ, and that levy rate that is actually set on an annual basis by the governing board of Dairy NZ. That rate hasn't changed for close to 10 years, but the dairy industry has seen huge growth over that period, and it's based on a per kilogram of milk solids, so we've actually seen a huge growth in our revenue base. So the levy itself basically has about 45 million US dollars. The difference on the screen comes from the leverage. So when we go into research programs, we actually leverage funds so we can invest together to run science programs or do work for others with our science teams. The diagram there, we call that our coin diagram, and it sort of kind of splits up for every dollar Dairy NZ invests across those. It shows where we sort of divide up our spending. So a little bit about what we do. So developing better solutions through science. And what I've done here is just sort of highlighted, some people call them challenges, I call them opportunities, and it sort of drives towards, and you'll see it drives towards helping our farmers farm better. So Dairy NZ invests in creating a cow for the future. So at the moment we have a large research program going, happening in the fertility space, better cow fertility and her lifetime productivity. This is a 7 years program, and once we get the results of that, it deals with the genetics of the cow and whether there are better genetics than others in this space, and that feeds into our animal evaluation program. New Zealand has a national database. All of the genetics are fed into that, so we continually breed better bulls that can then also breed into our national herd. So we've got superior genetics entering the herd every year. One of our big challenges here in New Zealand is nitrogen into our groundwater. So our cow pee, I guess, has a high nitrogen level, and that when it hits the ground, it actually filters through our soils and enters our groundwater. So there is a strong push to see if we can remove or limit the amount of nitrogen in the cow urine, and we're doing this through research programs in the area of genetics. And is there some genetics, and is some cows better than others, and also in feed, so different plant breeding, different plants, how they may absorb nitrogen out of the soil, as well as deal with the nitrogen coming from the cow urine. We invest in new plant breeding technologies. So we introduced a forage value index, which is a tool that farmers can use where all of our ryegrass species are valued based on their performance, and farmers can select different cultivars for their regions that best suit their needs. Currently, we're working on a hybrid technologies in hybrid ryegrass. So that's taking, I guess, the good genetics out of one and the other and putting them together to see if we can sort of get hybrid figure into our ryegrass species. And a lot of this will deal with persistency as we see the disease, or I guess plant disease and drought starting to impact on some of our standard ryegrasses. The other technology that we're investing in, and we're actually investing this offshore also with the New Zealand government and other Crown Research Institutes, is GM grasses. Now, New Zealand is GM free. We're not allowed to grow any crops that are involved with genetic modification. So we're doing this in the US with outsiders investing. Now we are starting to see signs that it could produce really good results for us around the nitrogen and also our greenhouse gases. So we invest in this technology. As we know, science, you can't do them in 1 year and get results. They're long-term programs. We wanted to be ahead of the game if one day that we get the opportunity to have the conversation in New Zealand. We didn't want to be behind if we could utilise it. It's an investment that we know that we may never be able to bring back to New Zealand. The other thing that we have done some science and are really in the farm systems is saving time and money on farm for the dairy farmers. So we know that they spend a lot of time actually in the milking parlour, milking the cows. So we've investigated and researched around milking times. Instead of milking what we predominantly call twice a day, is moving to sort of 16-hour milkings or milking every 24 hours, and how that may sit as a farm system, what it does to the economic base of the farm. And the other thing that we've done is looked at sort of lean principles to become more efficient in the milking area. So shaping a better future for the sector. So we provide a voice for our farmers. We use all of the science, so evidence and science base to, I guess, give our farmers a voice when we see changes of legislation in New Zealand, whether that's across water quality, animal welfare. And just this year alone, we've had 15 national legislation changes that we've put submissions into and supported farmers with data so they could also submit on these. 7 at a regional level. We've spoken at 4 select committees, and while we do this, we also spend quite a bit of time with the government building relationships and understanding about, I guess, what the challenges in the farming space, what we need, what we can also do to help them achieve what they want to nationally as well. We tell the farmer's story, and we build capability within our farmers group to give them the confidence to tell a story. We know when a farmer talks about their passion about why they farm and running their businesses, that it is well received. Interesting, even though we're probably the biggest sector in New Zealand, we actually only have 50% public support for dairy farming in New Zealand. There is quite a disconnect of, I guess, urban people living in urban regions to actually our rural communities, and some people may never have been on a New Zealand farm. So we build these stories with our farmers. They tell the stories, whether that's across social media or within their groups. And we do this because we see a lot of pressure coming from, I guess, misunderstanding about the opportunities that we offer, and I guess the journey that we're on to ensure that we're looking after our environment. We invest in educating the next generation. So we've had about 5,000 primary school aged children actually visit dairy farms. We have an ambassador called Rosie the cow. She's she's actually like a mascot. She's animated. We put curriculum into the schools about dairy farming, not only to teach the children. They tend to take that information home and they spread the good work that dairy farming provides New Zealand. We also have undergraduate scholarships, so we support with money and mentoring into on an annual basis, about 18 to 20 students that are studying in the agricultural space across our universities in New Zealand. And a big part of our levy take is that we manage risks with biosecurity. I will talk about the Mycoplasma bovis incursion that we've had recently, but previously it's been in the area of bovine tuberculosis. Since 1996, there's been a concerted effort and program running to remove that from New Zealand. We've now got down to about 11 herds, I think, that have reactors in them, and there are some regions across New Zealand that have no presence of bovine tuberculosis. So for every, I think for every dollar spent, yeah, about 23% of our levy goes towards the biosecurity. So supporting better farming locally. So across New Zealand, we have either research farms, focus farms, or I guess monitor farms. So this is where we take our research that we've done, probably not quite on the lab table, but in our detailed small component research area, and we push that out into the regions onto farms, and we scale those up. So farmers, it gives a platform so farmers can learn from that. They visit these farms, there's field days held, and then we can also apply it to put some context around it to their regional challenges. We have that loop comes back from the farmers. They talk about the challenges that they have within their regions, and those monitor farms and research farms attempt to, through farm systems and innovation, we attempt to manage those to try and find solutions. So we, Dairy NZ creates a forum for sharing knowledge, and this is where we have our teams run. Each region probably has, depending on the amount of dairy farms, each region has potentially up to about 10 what we call extension staff, and they hold events and workshops for farmers to join, sharing knowledge, showing new technologies, showing innovative work. This year or last year alone, we had over 2,500 workshops held across New Zealand. We invest a lot of time helping farmers take the lead and supporting farmer initiatives. A lot of this comes with financing, as well as providing them with data and evidence. I guess we have groups, we support groups like, we have a large dairy women's network in New Zealand. There's about 8,000 members on that. We fund into our rural leadership programs, Nuffield Scholarship, Kellogg's. We have a New Zealand Young Farmers Club that's got about 6,000 members, and that also has programs that sit in the primary school age and secondary school age of children. And we support and invest with the education facilities that actually run courses and that for the staff that are working on farms. We also are a major investor in the New Zealand Dairy Industry Awards, which is an annual event where we can showcase excellence in the sector, and there are awards attached to that. We also respond to local, regional issues. So across New Zealand, and particularly last season, we saw major drought across parts of New Zealand. We have teams on the ground, and this isn't only us, we're in collaboration with a rural support network of farmers who mentor. We also dairy processors where we go, and federated farmers. We go into the sector to support farmers with these challenges. So we had droughts in the North Island, and then in February, we had actual major flooding in the South Island. So we mobilised teams to support the farmers. In the past, when we've had earthquake damage and that, these teams are mobilised to support our farmers right at the coalface, so where these issues are happening. And finally, we sort of empower the industry with data. So we have a big database where we record and then report on financial performance. There's financial indices in there, as well as physical indices. So we use that information for farmers so they can benchmark against that to improve their efficiency, and we also use that as in the economic analysis when we are using our science economic analysis, and we push in with our submissions to central government when we want to see the bigger impact on some of the ruling that they sometimes want to implement. So I just want to talk about Mycoplasma bovis. So this is New Zealand's largest ever biosecurity incursion. So 2017, it was picked up by a vet that was working with a family a farming family in the centre of the South Island. There's many countries that operate with Mycoplasma bovis. We are the first country to attempt to eradicate. And we chose to do this because it sat in less than 1% of our national herd at that stage. We are actually partnering with government and the beef sector to see if we can actually eradicate this out of New Zealand. It's a $920 million program. The sector, the beef and the dairy sector, have agreed to fund 292 million of that, and we are doing that through a levy into the farmers, and dairy are actually going to be paying up to about $274 million towards this program. So we are well on track. We have actually got we had 250 confirmed cases. We have depopulated those herds. We've only got one active case remaining in New Zealand, and that herd will be lined up for depopulation very shortly. So we are this will be a 10-year program. We're 3 years in. We're looking at moving to more of a surveillance program, similar to what we do with our TB eradication. And so this has been a big concerted effort. What's been interesting is how we managed to immobilise to deal with this, and the synergies that we've been able to use with us trying to track and trace the COVID outbreak in New Zealand, and the two approaches have been well linked up and a forerunner into supporting each other, I guess. So there was really good outcomes with this. The farmers at first were a little bit upset that we chose to eradicate, but now we're coming out the other end. I think the feedback is that we've done the right thing, although the people that went through this process, and I had a family member that had to depopulate a herd of about 400, and it had impact on the milking herds as well. It was a reasonably stressful time, so it was not an easy program for the farmers that were immediately affected. Right, looking ahead, I guess farming in a new world. So I guess our focus for the immediate future is adoption of what we already know. So we know how to drive profit up in New Zealand, but we also have the challenge of we've got to reduce our environmental footprint. So we've got to reduce our surplus nitrogen, and we've got to drive down our greenhouse gases. So that's our immediate focus. We're running programs working with farmers because they're all interrelated, and yes, we could have success with driving profit up but not put the other two heading in the downward direction. So we're working with what we know to try and drive that forward. Adapting to the new environment due to climate change. I've already mentioned droughts and I've already mentioned flooding. So I guess it's how do we adjust our farm systems to cope with those extremes that come at us, and they're going to come every year, but we also don't know which one that will have the major impact on us. Speed and volatility, we all know what that's like. Our commodity price for our milk seems to fluctuate quite a bit, and then we also have all these things coming at us as well. And then adapting to consumer demands. So there's a huge demand in the animal welfare space, the environment, and also the way our people are treated on our farms and things like that. And if we link that back to our sector strategy, those are some of the pillars or the main drivers in that strategy. So we want to be the best place for people to work. We want to be world leading in the animal welfare space, and we're continually pushing that right to the edge to see how far we can go. So watch this space, I guess. So that really concludes it all. Thank you. It's great to explain all of the awesome work that Dairy NZ does. I know that there'll be some questions to answer after this, but I just want to finish with the thought that we're all in this together, and especially with the COVID, be safe, stay well. Thank you.